Somebody sends, "I miss you," and the message gets read within seconds, and then nothing comes back, not a word, not even a heart reaction. Most people read that silence as proof the other person doesn't care. Attachment research says the opposite is usually true. The person cares so much that replying feels physically impossible in that exact moment. This is not indifference, and it's not manipulation either. It's a nervous system reaction that has a name, a history, and a fix. Here is exactly what's happening inside that silent reader's brain, where the pattern comes from, and what actually works when you're on the other end of it. This starts with British psychiatrist John Bowlby, who spent from 1969 to 1988 building the case that humans are biologically wired to seek closeness to specific people, and that how we seek or avoid that closeness as infants becomes our template for adult relationships. His collaborator Mary Ainsworth turned that theory into something measurable in the 1970s, using a test called the strange situation to categorize how toddlers respond when a caregiver leaves the room and comes back. Her 1978 book, Patterns of Attachment, identified 3 patterns: secure, anxious, ambivalent, and avoidant. And a 4th pattern, disorganized, was added in 1986 by researcher Mary Main. Modern adult attachment research usually maps those onto 4 styles: secure, anxious preoccupied, dismissive avoidant, and fearful avoidant. And the silent reader almost always falls into one of the last 2. Start with the dismissive avoidant adult, because this is the most common version of the silent reader. This person typically grew up learning that bids for closeness got rebuffed, minimized, or punished, so their brain adapted by suppressing the urge to seek closeness at all. The result is someone who handles emotional moments alone by default, and who has built a strong, practiced sense of self-sufficiency as a kind of armor. Here's the part that surprises people. This person usually does want to respond warmly, but the act of responding triggers an alarm system built in childhood, one that reads warmth as danger instead of safety. Therapist Amir Levine and co-author Rachel Heller made this pattern widely known in their 2010 book Attached. And the core idea they popularized is worth knowing by name: fear of engulfment. Fear of engulfment isn't a fear of being close to someone. It's a fear of what closeness costs internally, like losing your own autonomy or becoming responsible for someone else's emotions. So the silent, dismissive, avoidant reader isn't avoiding the relationship. They're avoiding the internal cost that intimacy seems to demand from them every single time. Now the second version, the fearful avoidant, sometimes called disorganized, and this one is more intense than the dismissive type. This person wants intimacy even more strongly than the dismissive avoidant does, and at the same time, they are more afraid of it, which creates a direct internal collision. Reading "I miss you" activates both the attachment system and the fight-or-flight system at the exact same moment, so the body treats connection and threat as the same event. This is the type most likely to start typing a reply and then delete it, sometimes multiple times, before giving up entirely. Symptoms can include a racing heart, sudden numbness, unexpected anger at the sender, or a kind of mental blankness where words simply won't form. Many people with this pattern genuinely aren't choosing the silence. Their nervous system is blocking the sequence of actions that replying would require. So where does this actually come from? And why does it show up in so many adults who otherwise seem completely functional? A huge amount of it traces back to childhood emotional neglect, which is different from active abuse in one key way. It's not about what a parent did. It's about what they consistently failed to do. An emotionally neglecting parent doesn't necessarily hurt the child through action. They hurt through absence, through not noticing, not acknowledging, and not responding to the child's inner emotional life. The child in that environment learns a specific lesson early. Emotions are invisible here, and expressing them doesn't produce any result, so eventually they stop trying. Psychologist Janice Webb gave this pattern a name in her 2012 book Running on Empty, calling it childhood emotional neglect, and her clinical survey work estimated it affects roughly 1 in 6 adults in the United States. More recent large-sample academic research puts the exact number somewhat lower, but the core finding holds. A significant chunk of any adult group is carrying this exact history without realizing it has a name. So what does the actual moment look like, second by second, inside someone who just read "I miss you" and can't respond? First, there's a brief wave of relief. The recognition of being loved lands, and for a split second it feels good. Within seconds, sympathetic nervous system activity spikes, faster breathing, a hot feeling in the chest or throat, and a sudden cognitive blank where they simply don't know what to type. Their body isn't experiencing this as a warm moment. It's experiencing it as a test they already expect to fail. So they put the phone down, not because they don't want to respond, but because responding would mean confronting a need in themselves they've spent years learning to avoid. And this isn't random. Avoidant people tend to reach for the same small set of self-protective moves almost every time. Some delay the reply indefinitely, telling themselves, "I'll answer later," and later simply never arrives. Some quietly downgrade the message in their own head, telling themselves, "They didn't really mean it that seriously," as a way to lower the emotional stakes. Some read the message without opening the actual notification, specifically so no read receipt gets sent and no clock starts ticking. And some reply, but only to a completely unrelated part of the conversation, acknowledging the person exists without ever touching the vulnerable line itself. None of these are manipulation tactics. Every single one of them is a defensive adaptation from a system that is, in that exact moment, trying to protect itself from warmth it isn't equipped to receive. This is exactly why the silence hurts so much on the sending side, because it reads as deliberate, when the research says it almost never is. Researcher Mary Main and her colleagues gave this exact behavior a clinical name: attachment deactivating strategies. A set of cognitive and behavioral moves dismissive avoidant adults use specifically to shut down attachment system activation. By definition, those strategies are defensive, not offensive. The silent person isn't punishing anyone. They're managing an internal threat they don't yet have better tools to handle. So if confrontation doesn't work, what actually does? Couples researchers Sue Johnson and Les Greenberg, who built the emotionally focused therapy approach starting in the 1980s, found that direct confrontation, asking, "Why are you ignoring me?" almost always deepens the avoidance instead of breaking it. Sending a second message to push for a response tends to backfire the same way. It raises the perceived threat, and the avoidant brain just activates more deactivating strategies in response. What tends to actually work is the opposite move, keeping the bid for connection small, predictable, and completely unbundled from any expectation of an immediate reply. A message like, "Thinking of you, no need to reply," acknowledges the person's autonomy directly, which often reaches an avoidant partner without triggering the engulfment alarm at all. Over time, repeated small bids that never demand reciprocity start giving the avoidant nervous system new evidence, proof that bids for closeness can actually be safe to answer. For the more intense, fearful avoidant pattern, longer-term treatment approaches like EMDR and schema therapy, both developed from the 1990s onward, are what the clinical literature points to for actually addressing the underlying trauma. There are also 3 lesser-known angles that make this whole picture make a lot more sense. Psychologist Lisa Feldman Barrett's research on emotional granularity found that people who can't precisely name what they're feeling often can't draft a coherent reply either. "I miss you" is emotionally specific, and the recipient may not have language that precise for what's happening inside them. There's also a generational piece. Avoidant patterns are often inherited through modeling, meaning the silent recipient's own parent may have done the exact same thing to them decades earlier, and they learned the response by watching it happen. And there's a medium-specific piece too. Researchers studying digital communication have found that text-based emotional bids are unusually activating for avoidance, because there's no tone of voice and no facial expression to soften the moment. Without those in-person cues, the alarm system has nothing to calm it down, which is part of why this exact scenario happens so often over text specifically. So the next time you send, "I miss you," and get met with silence, here's what's actually more likely true than the story your brain wants to tell you. The person on the other end isn't absent, they're present, and they're overwhelmed by something they don't have full control over yet. That overwhelm is sitting inside a real, documented developmental pattern that millions of adults carry around without ever knowing it has a clinical name. And attachment patterns, while remarkably durable, are not a life sentence. With the right pacing, the right kind of low-pressure bids, and sometimes professional support, they can genuinely shift. If you've ever wondered why some people can say, "I love you," instantly while others can't say it after years together, that's actually the same attachment system driving both extremes, and it's worth understanding on its own. That exact comparison is what the next video breaks down. Watch that one next.